In this panel discussion, our experts will discuss new methods of learning, keeping an eye on Gen Z. I would like to invite Manish Rao, CPO Mindtree, to moderate this discussion. Joining him are the industry experts. It's my pleasure to invite them for the discussion. Raj Dharmaraj, Head People Transition and Transformation Group India and APAC, Cognizant. Sundarajan Narayanan, CPO and Executive VP, Virtusa. Janardhan Santhanam, Global Head Talent Development, Tata Consultancy Services. Raghav Gupta, MD Coursera India and APAC.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ETHR World, for inviting us to speak on new methods of learning. I am privileged to be hosting this with the esteemed panel members, Raj, Sundar, Janardhan, and Raghav. It's a proud privilege for me. Learning starts at birth and continues till the end. Initially from parents, then from teachers, friends, celebrities, professionals. We choose mentors, guides, and teaching has evolved over thousands of years, starting from the days of Gurukul to the most elegant classrooms, from blackboards to electronic boards, the text from which can be printed or mailed, from books to tablets, from one teacher to several teachers, from anywhere in the world to learning from the internet. About 3 years back, when I was getting ready to hang my boots, the company that I was working for acquired a carve out of a business which had a substantial base in Israel. I had no context of the country, its culture, its law, its statute, people practices, competition, etc. I volunteered to take a week class on the things that I should know to welcome the workforce on board and also be able to manage their expectations and stay in competition. COVID-19 has changed the paradigm. The world adjusted to the new situation. We spent over 10 months working remotely from anywhere. This has given confidence to the industry that it's possible to work remotely and remain in business apart from the financial advantages that it brings. The gig economy will increase its pace of presence and the world may see more individual entrepreneurs. While this situation may bring many changes to the future of work and the workforce, one thing in context of the topic comes to my mind is learning. If gig is going to be engaged for specific work, paid on results, the learning will also be her responsibility to stay relevant. Given this, my first question to Raghav. Raghav, do you experience a change in learning before COVID and now? And what are those changes? I for sure have experienced over 60% increase in learning hours and 50% increase in unique learners. Over to you, Raghav.
I think that's a great question to get us started, Manish. And like you said, I think in general, at Coursera, we have the benefit of being able to see how learning is panning out across millions of people, thousands of companies. So I'm happy to share some of what we've seen over the last year or so. But I want to just step back, just getting us started a little bit and say that we've seen massive changes as well, right? The World Economic Forum is calling it double disruption, right? Automation was already happening, COVID kicked in. And I think they're talking about many changes that are happening. Two of those changes are directly linked to learning and development. Automation was driving the need for new skills, and that need has accelerated. And COVID has created the situation where in our companies, many of us will continue to work from home even post COVID going away. And so this combination of working from home and new skills is throwing up a new situation. And so we're definitely seeing around the world that the need for learning has changed, has accelerated. At Coursera, across millions of learners around the world and in the country, we've seen a 500% increase in learning between 2019 and 2020. Within the company space, within corporate learning, there are studies out there which say 42 hours of learning, which a working professional would do earlier has now gone up close to 100 hours per person in 2020. And within India, in the business that I run, we've seen 50 lakh individuals who were on our platform has gone to 1 crore last year. So safe to say, lots more need for learning given this whole double disruption that we are seeing, and some of that translating into building digital skills, building data skills, building human skills. But that's a broad overview of some of what we have seen.
Excellent. Thank you. Raj, over to you. How palpable are these changes in Cognizant?
Very much in line with what both of you had mentioned, Panish and Raghav. So, in the mainstream part of the business, I would say anywhere between maybe a 20 to 30% uptick in our traditional training and learning courses. That doesn't really reflect perhaps what we're seeing with some of the smaller companies that we've acquired, where it's anywhere in the range of 50 to 100% increase. The numbers that Raghav called out are not unsurprising. And what this doesn't include, interestingly, I think what the pandemic has done is supercharge the cohort-based virtual training, which may not be directly related to skills in any way. I'm talking about everything from online fitness to yoga to even photography, right? So if you add all that up, it's a huge amount of actual investment in self-learning as well as career-oriented.
Including cooking, if I can add.
Myself included, Panish.
Sundar, what do you think are the skills of the future? And how do you impart them in your learning culture calendar at Virtusa?
Very good question, Panish. And, there's a great feedback that we got from Raj and Rajiv on what's happening. But to answer a question about the skills, I think there is I would like to answer this in 3 parts. So we look at one around the future technology skills, where it is heading. Then there is a strong inclination towards the domain skills. Then the third one is about, I call this as enablement skills. These are the 3 areas that I see as future. And in the technical skills specifically, it revolves around cloud native, AML, robotics, IoT, and the 3D printing are the skills that we see more and more happening in the customer areas to upskill and upgrade over a period of time that we are able to see it very, very clearly. And secondly, on the domain, days have gone where we were seeing generic domain skills as a banking or a insurance or a healthcare life sciences. Now the skills are becoming more techno specific with domain. Banking means is it retail, corporate, or investment banking. In payer, in insurance is the payer. So it is going deeper in technology or the telco. It is also going deeper based on the type of iOS devices people are using. So the domain is getting more and more stronger. And very interestingly, these 2 things, I see it as a 50%. And everyone speaks about innovation. And innovation happens through the enabling skills, we call it as. And the enabling skills we look at, one is around creativity and critical thinking. That is one area. Then the second one is around the collaboration. Then the third one is around the emotional intelligence. And last one is around intellectual curiosity. These 4 enabling skills are becoming more and more important as we go into the future. Next decade is going to be around these 4 areas in the enabling skills. So companies can build a COE to build a technical skill, or a university to build a domain skill, but this enabling skill is becoming more and more important, and we have started focusing on it because innovation happens in the critical thinking or in the area of collaboration, whatever I mentioned. So this is the future skills that we are looking at.
Perfect.
And you asked about how Virtusa is managing it, right? So I would like to showcase a practical or a realistic example that you will shortly see it in a lot of media or in online stuff, what we are going to do. This is around, we call it as Engineering IQ. It is a platform that we have created in the company. So what this means is this platform revolves around one, it's like a IP protocol, internet protocol. So every employee will be named with, there is an employee name, there is a skill competency level which will be mapped with what is the technology skill that person carries in a scale of 1 to 10. What is the domain skill that person carries? Similarly, on a scale of 1 to 10. Enabling skill on a 1 to 10 level. Role readiness on a 1 to 10 level. Okay, and experience on all these skills on 1 to 10 level. And this will be managed with L1 to L5 level. So this helps, we are gamifying the environment. Already this has been gamified. We have implemented to almost 70% of our workforce today. So this becomes one of the core for us to drive the skill, drive the learning around 3 areas, whatever I have discussed about. This is a platform that we have created last year, got launched during the COVID times, that has been helping us to manage a lot of requirement related scenarios.
So there a follow-up question to what you said. Do people have the flexibility to change the domain and the technology if they wanted to, or is that fixed in your intelligence in the system?
No, they can change at any point of time. So they may not. So when they start, say for example, a campus person, when they join the company, they go through this EAQ assessment. And the assessment of EAQ, certain things are done by the engineers. Engineer mean I'm talking about the principal engineers who are all the practice engineers. Practice guys set up the competency of the technology side. And the enablement skill side are done by the leadership development team, for where they start, how they are good at collaboration, that level. And the domain is done by the domain consulting team. So when they start at the ground level where it starts, and when they are going up the value chain, they can see from a score of 1, how are they climbing up from 1 to 10. In between, if they feel from healthcare, I wanted to move to life sciences, yes, it is possible. Maybe at a bottom pyramid, it is easier. It is easier to move. When they go to the top pyramid, it takes some time for them to move because they will reach certain level of competency.
Excellent, thank you. Janardhan, bringing you in, you come from the company that's usually leading the industry in this era of changing technology. Every 6 months, what are your best practices in learning, and how do you ensure that your several lakhs of people are up to date with technology? And have you digitized the learning to fill the skill gap for people in TCS?
Yeah, Vanish, take a step back. It's not just the rapid pace of technology. Actually, the business cycles, business growth, business demand, particularly the revival that we've been seeing in the last 2 quarters, local regulations, country to country differences, even immigration law changes. And finally, on the learner side also, the evolving mentality of the learners who are perpetually in a continuous partial attention state, particularly in these times where we are completely 100% digital, right? All of these are factors which contribute very heavily to the dynamism of learning and ensuring that learning is effective. So in our company, we've focused on agility of learning at scale for quite some time, for at least 5 years now, and not just build platforms, but certain philosophies that we have promoted amongst everyone from top to bottom. For instance, we've said that learners should have absolutely zero friction in the process of learning, because practically we are competing with Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, and everything else that they can spend 5 minutes on, right? So absolutely zero friction. And on the other side, include persuasive techniques, analytics, personalization techniques like the Amazons and Netflixes and everyone else does. Build that into the way we deliver learning to our learners. So that has been the kind of the anchor point and a lot of the new platforms and apps that we have launched. But philosophically, from a learner point of view, a learner should be able to learn just enough, just in time, and just for me what I need right now. That has been enabled to make sure that we are very, very conscious of the time that the people have and they can put, and we maximize the productivity of content out of even a 5-minute learning capsule. So this has been our primary approach. Not everyone across different experience segments or across different capabilities that they need to build, whether it's technology, domain, soft skills, not everyone learns alike. Believe it or not, there are a large majority like to go through pages and pages of literature, and they like to read it. Although there is a good amount of video content, interactive content, games, and all of that. So we have to cater to those different styles. So that has been another key effort that we have taken. Some people actually like to learn more through hackathons. Others like to learn more through communities. Enabling all of those has been the key. So with all of these kinds of philosophies in place, we've seen the entire company engage in learning like never before. Like many of my co-panelists shared, this last quarter alone, we had about 12 million hours of or more of learning from TCS associates. And the same goes for all our consumption of cloud labs and partner resources and everything that we've seen. So it's a big ecosystem that requires to be run, considering the diversity and the scale that one needs to operate in this industry.
Absolutely. I think the punchline is different people, different ways of learning, which is evident. Raghav, bringing you in, learning needn't be only on technology. How do we make behavioral learning platform-based, and which are more experience-based learning?
That's a great question, Panish. And I'm looking at some data as we're talking. And this dashboard I'm looking at talks about the top 10 skills for working professionals and how those changed in 2019 versus 2020 on the Coursera platform. And I refer to Coursera data because I think it's quite representative given the size and scale of the platform. So there have been people who come from, top 10 industries on our platform. There's technology services, companies such as yours, technology products, financial services, automotive, pharmaceuticals, oil and gas, and so on. And I'm looking at 2019, and in the top 10 skills that working professionals learned on the Coursera platform across different industries, the top 6, or I should say 6 out of the 10 are actually technology and digital related skills. And that was the situation in 2019. There's Python, there's neural networks, there's deep learning, so on and so forth. And there was a little bit of business skills, and there was a little bit of, communication, and so on and so forth. But in 2020, the number 1 skill that people learned on our platform was writing. The number 4 was mindfulness. The number 5 was meditation. The number 6 was gratitude. The number 10 was learning. And I think what it's telling us is, given what COVID has shifted, right? The essential skills of the future are a combination of digital, which we were already seeing, but also a combination of human skills as well. And so 2 courses which really stood out in the last year was, one is called The Science of Well-Being from Yale University. And so in this place, in this space of, listening and meditation and gratitude, people really doubled down and said, I care for my personal well-being, I care for my happiness, and I actively want to build skills in that space as opposed to, just hoping that this is intuitive. And the other thing where we saw a significant amount of adoption is a course called Learning How to Learn. And I'm talking millions of people taking these courses in India as well as around the world. And so I think even bodies like the World Economic Forum talk about this, that the essential skills of the future are a combination of digital and human. So, problem solving, self-management, working with other people, and so on and so forth. And I think that's what we are kind of focused on as well.
Actually, you're so right. COVID-19 has taught many of people many things in life, and especially, has questioned the purpose of life for many people. And I do hope that those stay even in good times once the pandemic is over. Janardhan, bringing you in with my next question. Most companies hire a lot of green shoots from colleges. Their learning starts when they're already in college to make them productive as early as possible and to bridge the gap between theory and practice when they come to the companies to work for. How is this going to change, and what training methods and technologies have you incorporated in your program at TCS?
Yeah, Panish, we've been seeing this change in the last 5 years quite dramatically. We have also kept pace and kept looking forward at what we need to do. Like, annually we take anywhere between 30 to 40,000 engineering graduates. That itself is a fair bit to train well in advance. And we've reimagined that process quite a bit. Now that entire training starts right at the time of offer acceptance when they are in their 7th semester onwards. And they go through a very rigorous module, which helps build a T-shaped profile fairly early on in their career, even before they get into TCS. So in our company, we have built something called a T-Factor for technology. So which emphasizes that you need to have a good breadth of a lot of foundational skills and then specialize in one or more of them, which builds that T-shape. Very happy to see that more than 85% of those freshers take so deep interest in completing this learning that they actually come in project ready at least after completing the foundation. And at least a third of them go through that deeper level certifications in advanced digital subjects that we provide to them as a proactive investment through the platforms that we have. So we run TCS Ion as is the central platform on which we run all this learning. And again, just like in the corporate context post their joining, while they're in college, they need that multimodal intervention. So there are courses, there are web connects, there are communities, there are hackathons, there are assessments, and people partake in all of this. But one key way that we have also reimagined bringing this to become a culture within them is to start linking it to the project, the location, the nature of work that they will do, and also their financial rewards after they join their company. So there are incentives tied to completion of this learning. The type of nature of work that they will do will look at this data, right? It's entirely a data-driven game now. What have you learned? How much have you demonstrated? How have you upped your learning through the course of 7th and 8th semester and got in? A lot of our business units, which are specialized units like IoT, data and analytics, engineering services, directly get in touch with a lot of these people because they are, we try to increase the portion of those who are already pre-mapped to join those businesses, and they run specialized courses in addition to all of this. So fairly intense game of learning and engagement that typically happens during that time, bringing us fairly good numbers and very high deep quality.
Absolutely. You must be doing that very well because the number of freshers that you hire is not even the total number of people we have in the company. Raj, bringing you in, is AI ML helping in pacing the learning? And given that not all will learn at the same pace, how are you offering a targeted and personalized user experience? And what is your view on the role of technology in learning going forward? Any example of AR, VR application of its globally and in India, please?
I'll try and break that down, Panish, quite a bit there. But to your first question, I think from an AI ML perspective, I think there are already, and for the last couple of years, some ways that it's already being woven into the fabric of what we're doing in the learning space, if you will. I think one obvious area is, especially given COVID, and we've seen a lot of acceleration, is to help with very quick onboarding and transition of people who come into projects, either into the company or onto a new project. You can have very effective self-service capabilities in terms of learning, orientation, familiarization using AI and ML rather than have dependency on individuals. So that's helped us scale dramatically. That's something that's been around for a couple of years, and we're getting better at it, I suppose. The other critical piece, given what Jana and a few others referred to, is the shorter nature, the agile nature of our projects and project requirements. So identification of almost skill matching and adjacency of skills enables us to identify perhaps learning needs and candidates who have specific learning needs. And much like Jana mentioned, popping up suggestions for what could be a related training that somebody might be interested in helps tap into that intrinsic motivation. We're seeing a lot of the youngsters, as Jana said, very passionate about building out their capabilities in different ways. And I suppose the traditional way, and Raghav is the expert here, but we're seeing a lot of the platforms we work with look at the adaptive assessment aspect of the learning programs, right? So how does one, it's going back to your point about customization, how do we tailor the pace and the difficulty level of learning inputs based on how we determine the progress or the ability of a learner to digest? So moving up levels based on increasing the difficulty of questions. All these are built into the adaptive assessment or the metacognitive piece. So that's the AI/ML. I think technology overall, to your the second broad part of your question, I think huge opportunities, and not just for learning. We talk right from hire to retire. We're seeing companies use all sorts of unique and innovative ways to. So we've started using video-based hiring and fitment, right? So that not just is the skill component of the candidate's profile, but also what we think is the behavioral fit, and at the back end using a little bit of predictive analytics to see, is this good hire? So it takes away a little bit of the bias, the interviewer bias that we typically tend to see. So it almost like a back end validation or a third umpire reference, if you like, right? So that's been pretty effective. Talent supply chain, as I mentioned, search match internally, deployment, suggesting when somebody would be the right fit for a particular open role. That's a big sweet spot for us using technology. Engagement, gamification, again, Jana talked about, right? Engagement, sentiment surveys, these kind of technologies have really, taken a leap forward. We're using that quite actively. So these are, I think, some of the well-known applications of technology. And I think the last part of your question on AR, VR, in our particular industry, I think a few ways that we've actually seen usage is for some elements of behavioral training, typically where it's difficult to replicate a situation. So say, for instance, a client-facing personnel, making pitches, giving them feedback, giving them cues on how they did. Or even folks that are working in, say, retail environment in our business process service industries, like that's a very quick and easy use of AR, VR, putting them in a difficult customer situation. How do they handle responses, giving them feedback? So those are areas that we've actually actively using AR, VR. We are seeing an uptick there. For our clients, of course, I think the biggest use or the biggest implementation, if you like, are high-risk environments which are difficult to duplicate. Right? So everything from critical surgeries to maintenance of nuclear plants, and by default, because we service some of these industries, we have to make sure that some of our personnel go through the same training. So these are some of the. So it's a hugely exciting space, Panish.
Very nice. I have a follow-up question to you. I'm sure you will have heard of immersive learning, which we were probably, when I was growing up, I knew it as internship and projects and stuff like that, involving people into learning. Tell me, in your understanding, what are the elements that it encompasses, and what is the technology that enables this immersive learning in the new era?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it links back to some of what we were talking about earlier, right? So a simple way to think about it is experiential learning, right, or learning in the flow of work. The stickiness of learning really comes not from just getting the certification, but being able to apply in practical, terms in a real life situation or as near a real life. So we like to think about it in 3 or 4 broad ways. There's the traditional one, Panish, that you talked about, right, which involved role-based skilling and learning. And typically, it could be you want to give a stretch assignment to, a high potential, and you find a role that will challenge the person, put them in the role, get them, feedback, and that's completely technology agnostic, right? Moving forward, technology has started helping us do things like simulation-based training, and again, that's been around for quite a while now. Things like judgment and decision making, or even program management. We have a very popular one that puts a potential project manager in charge of an F1 Ferrari team, right? And through that simulation of decisions that he or she makes, is the reinforcement of project management, program management skills comes through. That's a hugely popular one, right? And the last piece is, I think, where the industry is going. The immersive experience is really the AR, VR, or mixed reality almost, where you can create that entire simulation of a real life experience as nearly as possible. So learning in the flow of work really is how I like to think about it.
Thank you. Raghav, to you, what are the types of learning systems that are available?
So I want to say this, right? If we think about what's happening in industry, and many folks on the panel represent tech services, but if you think a little bit about what's happening in financial services, what's happening in auto, what's happening in banking and pharma, right? Many companies are saying we are becoming software companies, right? That's what a lot of the development is happening, because everybody at least wants to drive in-house capability, in-house thinking. And what we've seen, and the statistic is well known, right? Because companies are saying we are technology companies, they're spending a lot of money on adopting technology. So I believe the number is like $500 billion of technology was purchased by companies around the world last year or something like that. But what is alarming is that companies are also saying that we only realized 10% of the value that we could have realized from this $500 billion investment. So investments going into technology in a bank, but the bank is saying, I'm not getting what I should be getting out of this investment. And in that context, we are finding that I think a lot of the successful programs that we are running are a combination of delivering knowledge, but also a combination of delivering application, and a combination of taking a course, but also taking a project that you can do in learning is what is going to deliver skill development. And I think I'm allowed to say this, Panish, you guys run this amazingly successful program at Mindtree, and we partner with you. And this is public news, so I'll say that Mindtree was the top winner of the best skills transformation program at the Coursera conference in London last year, when we could all meet in person. And I think the reason for a program like this being successful, to your question about what are the different learning systems, is that it needs to be delivering knowledge, but it also needs to be delivering hands-on learning. And so early last year, we launched something that we call guided projects. And what a guided project does, right? If my company, and I'm a bank, right? And if I went ahead and purchased Salesforce and I said to my wealth managers, guys, use Salesforce to work with your HNI clients, chances are, those wealth managers are applying 10, 15% of that. But what a project does is it tells my wealth manager, come, in a virtual environment, learn how to use Salesforce at ABC Bank, and then start adopting it. And we're finding massive success with these hands-on learning kind of examples, right? So to my mind, I think a combination of knowledge via courses and a combination of practice via projects is, I think, what really delivers, I think, a new age learning system, which I think is the exciting way to be thinking about it.
Thanks so much. Sundar, coming to you, do you experience any change in learning methods by generation? And how do you ensure that all learn and adapt to technology?
Interesting question. Yes, absolutely. We see a lot of changes by generation. If you look at the generation, the generation gap, I see it as the current Gen Z or the millennials, Gen Z, what we call. They from 5 to 10, they learn how to play in not 5 to 10, actually 0 to 5. They learn how to play in Lego blocks. From there 5 to 10 into the iPads, then 10 to 15 into the collaborative gaming environment, and from 15 to 20, day in day out, they play and they collaborate, they build community. So we have to create an environment in the organization for them to have a similar working model. It should not be like a Monday blues for them. So we have created a We Innovate environment in Virtusa to put in place. That starts from when they are in college. I was smiling when my TCS friend and the Cognizant friend were talking about what they're doing in the campuses. Similarly, we have started in the second year, like a center of excellence. Almost 50 universities that we have went and signed up for center of excellences, where our technology team gets engaged with them on a gamified environment. So what they do, what packets of information we send, whoever wants to sign, say, that we have identified 25 technologies, and we have, it starts from security to cloud. So to Pega, to name it, with the help of different SI partners that we have put in place. So we wanted to build that community from there, and they get communicated. A VIT can communicate with SRM, and SRM can communicate with NIT. That is the way that we have built that platform for this community. For learning methods, they wanted to always challenge. They wanted to be challenged. They wanted to be the hackathon way of learning, one of our friend mentioned. So we have built a platform that helps. It is a COE based platform that we have built that is for the millennial type of community. Second one, we have, that's a different way of learning, and we continue that. It is a, we speak about diversity in gender, in different diversity, we speak about it. We are talking about diversity based on competency. So if somebody, it is not about 1 into 10, it is not about 10 into 1, it is about 1 into 10, that we have started identifying from the year second, third year, we start identifying who can be a good leader, who can be a good, who can be a good presentable person to the customer when they join us from the campus. So it's a completely experiential learning process that we have put in place. That is one area. That's a different training methodology altogether. It has been developed over a period of time. We worked hard for last 5 years and got implemented 3.5 years back, and it's been piloted in different places. And now we are successful. Our time to bill, our bill to productivity, everything, all the ratios, all the KPIs are increasing because of that. That is one area. Then the second one is about team members who are 20, to put it 5 years plus is another set of people. We need to continuously focus on them. For that, we have put in our, we changed our, like any other company, we changed our performance management. But the way we have changed is on real-time performance management that talks about multiple areas. One, the code quality. I don't know how many in our industry are doing the code quality check, reusability, and helping or guiding other team members in the program. All these are all point-based system. We have implemented a ERA platform in our organization where we can start calculating, and okay, now in Corona time, it will not be visible in the offices. Normally, when somebody goes into our campuses, everybody will say, oh, today's top coder, today's top reusable person, today's guide, today's this person have done this much of interviews. So we are building that method, so that pushes them to learn, and that pushes them to compare. When you say, X is better than Y, without data, it is very hard for any generation to digest. So we are building in everything based on data. So everything based on data with a platform where they can go and see. So the way this platform works, Panish, is when you click, immediately they say, okay, I am equivalent to 50th percentile. How many above are there and how many below are there? So we are creating an environment which is purely gamified. So with that gamification, learning happens. It's a continuous learning happens between that. Then lastly, which is very much important, is this relevant? We check with business, we check with customers, and continuously we give that information and data point for both the customers and for businesses to evaluate a continuous improvement around this programs. So this is the way that we do in order to adapt, in order to build the the next wave of learning methodology in the company, and it's a continuous process.
Thank you, Sundar. Janardhan, what is the infrastructure you think is required to encourage and build a culture of learning in a workplace of the future?
Manish, I'll broaden that a little bit to actually reinterpret the word infrastructure itself. So 4 perspectives come to my mind immediately. One is that we talk a lot about exec sponsorship, top-down buy-in and all that, right? In the kind of industry we are in now, the kind of agile flat world we are in now, one needs to start adopting the mindset of a serving leader or a playing captain. And all our execs, for example, also embody and play that. They are not just an executive sponsor per se, but they are themselves going through these programs along with these learners. They are immersing themselves in being agile, in change leaders. Some of our unit heads who own P&Ls are going through cloud certifications. So they need to demonstrate that I am there, I'm leading from the front, and I'm here to serve you. And I'm demonstrating that learning culture. And that brings the whole DNA, not just talk about it in town halls, which they do. Every press conference, every town hall, every leadership address, continuous learning is at the forefront. That's the first thing. The second thing is the structure of how learning as a group, how it works and how it's collaborating with business. So it's no longer a support function. It's no longer a part of an HR organization Technically it is, but it is deeply and heavily embedded and working collaboratively with business. More than half of the people in my team are actually technologists, delivery heads, program managers, domain consultants who are rotating in and out of business all the time. And alluding to what Raghav was saying earlier, in some ways I can say that we are a technology group which happens to be working on learning. We work so much on enabling that through that kind of a culture. Third thing that comes is the whole partner infrastructure, right? So for a long time, this industry has taken a direction where there is enough content, enough materials, enough contributing companies around us that create this ecosystem. So we focus on curate more than create. The efforts of our internal SMEs is more towards translating our internal contextual knowledge to add on learning components and get a lot of the foundational common basics from our partners. So we operate, for instance, with more than a 25+ partner ecosystem just within the learning organization itself, which brings content, labs, various other kinds of learning interventions. And the fourth is that to anchor all of this, we need to take on, the learning organization needs to take on the role of the experience layer. The infrastructure required to deliver this at scale, particularly in this pandemic situation, where 100% of the learning is happening only digitally, including soft skills training using AI-based methods, including leadership, behavior, resilience, mentoring, and all those kinds of skills. Requires a fair bit of investment on web-based learning infrastructure, in parallel collaboration and community-based tools, survey, Menti, polls, kinds of things that go together with it, games and simulations like Raj mentioned earlier, digital whiteboards to accompany it, breakout rooms, social media, internal social media. So all of that, weaving that into a seamless single experience and not give a disparate experience to our learners is the fourth key infrastructure investment. So happy to share that all of this is things that we have been working on for a while in the past, not just caught by surprise during the pandemic. And for that, we've also been repeatedly recognized by top organizations like ATD, Brandon Hall. I think any mid-sized or large enterprise in general will need to start thinking from these various aspects of infrastructural investments.
So much. You've been so nice to share with us what you do as an organization. Would you also be open to share with us your training content so that we also from outside TCS can learn from you?
We do quite a lot of that, incidentally. I don't know if it's that well known, but for instance, we run a lot of campus commune, which is open to all kinds of students across India, where there are multiple communities with learning. TCS Ion, which is one of our education arms, publishes and conducts various learning and education related things, many of which are also open to public. And our site and many of our things that we put out on our video channels is also available. But yeah, happy to have honest discussions on that too.
Thank you so much. Gracious of you. So gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the session, which we could continue to learn from each other. All I can say is it was my privilege and pleasure to lead this session and have the honor of asking you the questions and have the pleasure of learning from you. If any one of you want to go summarize what you thought of this session and you missed out any point that you wanted to make for the benefit of the others, please go ahead, take a minute each and just conclude whatever you had to share.
I'm happy to get us started with a summary, if I may, Panish. And with the intent of keeping this brief, right? And I think a number of us said this: the essential skills of the future are a combination of digital and human. I would say that as, I think one of the things that many of us spoke about. To add to that, what I would say is that this whole double disruption that I was kind of referring to requires not incremental skill development, but deep skill development, because just the kind of skills that the future will need are going to be different. And I think there, an approach that we've seen work quite well is a combination of knowledge development, but also hands-on application. And together, a combination of knowledge development and hands-on application can lead to skill mastery, which is, I think, what the future is asking of us.
Sundar, Jana,
yep.
Raj.
Yep. So I can start, Sundar, here. So in summary, we need to be cognizant that we operate in a digital economy, and that impacts us not just professionally, but also socially. It starts from a Google map or a GPS or integral part of our lives in an e-wallet or mobile. So devices, we can't operate without that. From a professional standpoint, the only way for organization and and workforce to stay relevant and to stay in business is through continuous learning, being agile and being adaptive.
I'll just add on to what Raghav said in terms of future skills. Knowledge, skill, point capabilities. Beyond that, mindsets is becoming very important. Mindset of being open to rapid change, learning quickly, unlearning quickly, working in a volatile and ambiguous environment and still giving it a structure. Developing confidence in large global diverse teams, which we have never worked with before, is becoming very important even at early stages of one's career. That together with automation, scale, application of AI, and deeply leveraging technology to drive learning is the way forward as I see it.
If I can add flexibility too, of wanting to change from one track to the other, which is also sort of a mindset in people.
Absolutely.
Raj?
Yeah, I agree with all the sentiments. If I were to kind of add my wrap-up comments, I think where we're seeing, I think Sundar called this out. What we're looking for, for particularly for Gen Z folks, is a trait which you could call it curiosity, learning, intentionality. Every moment or every engagement is an opportunity to learn. So we're looking for that, and we're training for that. And we're tapping in, I think, in this generation into 2 or 3 of the core motivation drivers: the autonomy of learning, putting the power to learn in the hands of the individual employee. The focus is on tapping into their need for mastery of a skill, so equipping them with that, and then tying it back to the larger purpose. I think this generation really wants to see the larger purpose to which they're actually being trained for. So autonomy, mastery, purpose, as a summary of how we're tapping in.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you once again.
Thank you everyone for your time and great content. Stay tuned for the next session as we'll take a short networking break. You all can visit the exhibit hall and explore our partners booth. And yes, don't forget to join us on social media using the hashtag ETHRNextTech.